A few weeks ago, I released a video about the MiG-21S, and in that video I concluded that despite not having any countermeasures, this is still a remarkably fun jet, and that's simply because of its insane flight performance. In fact, I had such a good time playing that jet that once I was done recording, I was a bit sad I now no longer had an excuse to keep playing the MiG-21S. However, that sadness was short-lived, as I now once again had a reason to revisit another 9.7 jet, one that I love equally as much as the MiG-21S, but never really had any reason to play. And that jet is this, the J35A. To quickly get you up to speed, just like the MiG-21S, this is also a rank 6 premium that has a battle rating of 9.7. And interestingly, although I really like this plane, that's not exactly because it's good. Now, of course, I'll explain to you why I say that in just a minute, but first I want to talk to you about Golden Eagles. With today's video sponsor, Free GE for War Thunder, you too can earn Golden Eagles completely for free by completing simple tasks, such as filling out a survey or trying out a new game. And when you download the app through the first link in the description, make sure to use my invitation code MDK9K to receive 10 extra Golden Eagles to help you get started. On paper, the J35A looks absolutely phenomenal. However, once you start to dig a little bit deeper, you'll realize that actually, it's not that simple. Under optimal conditions, this jet has an absolutely hilarious thrust-to-weight ratio, but again, that's only under optimal conditions. When you pull up the actual thrust chart and compare it to the MiG-21S, then you'll see that most of the time the MiG-21S absolutely wipes the floor with the J35A, and that is especially true at slower speeds, which means that this jet doesn't have amazing acceleration, at least not when compared to some of the other 9.7s available. In and of itself, that mediocre acceleration isn't the end of the world, but paired with this jet's absolutely atrocious energy retention, it starts to become a problem. Not only does it take the J35A quite a while to get up to speed, but keeping that speed is quite the challenge, because the second you start turning, you'll lose all your energy within a moment's notice. As a result, it is extremely easy for you to get energy trapped whilst you're playing the J35A. If you don't play your cards perfectly and you come up against an enemy who understands how to play the energy game, you're going to have a tough time playing this jet. But it gets worse, because just like a lot of other fighters around this battle rating, the J35A doesn't get any countermeasures, which is a massive problem because in this matchmaker it is very common to run into aircraft that are carrying missiles which are extremely hard to dodge without flares. Now look, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that this will result in you dying to such missiles every single game. However, if you want to survive and do well, you will be forced to play this jet in a very particular way. You have to be extremely careful about your positioning in an attempt to ensure that no enemy is going to be able to launch an undodgeable missile at you in the first place. Anyway, the TLDR so far is that the J35A has rather atrocious acceleration, absolutely horrible energy retention, and perhaps the final nail in the coffin is the fact that it doesn't get any countermeasures. And yet, despite those three major shortcomings, I still think the J35A is an extremely fun jet, at least in the context of RRB, and that's for one major reason. Compared to basically any other jet that this plane can run into, the J35A has an insanely low wing loading, and that has some interesting consequences. First and foremost, this plane has a really low stall speed, which means that whilst other aircraft may be falling out of the sky because they're traveling too slowly, this plane will keep chugging along and be perfectly happy. But more importantly, the insanely low wing loading of this jet results in it being incredibly maneuverable. Wherever you point your mouse cursor, this plane's nose will follow, and that makes it not only extremely easy to stay glued to the six of your enemy, but it also makes it incredibly easy to then even lead your guns. So the second you get behind somebody, you're gonna have a relatively easy time shooting them down. And as you can probably imagine, that results in this plane being incredibly powerful in dogfights. However, that statement does come with a pretty massive asterisk. Again, this plane is very susceptible to being energy trapped, and that's primarily due to its horrendous energy retention. As a result, while this plane can stay glued to the six of any enemy, it can only do so for a limited amount of time. And because this plane also doesn't have great acceleration, you don't have the ability to simply disengage once you start losing the fight. In other words, if you don't manage to kill the enemy you're dogfighting quickly, you're likely gonna get energy trapped with no way out, and as a result, this plane is extremely unforgiving. And weirdly enough, this, in my opinion, is precisely why the J35A is a lot of fun to fly. Whilst this jet is technically extremely maneuverable and therefore very potent in a fight, it's only really capable of being great if you can manage to make the most out of it within the limited amount of time/energy that you have. And therefore, doing well in this jet is quite a challenge. But if you're up for that challenge and you spend some time trying to understand this airframe, then you will be rewarded with an extremely fun and unique dogfighter. So to make a long story short, the J35A may not be the best aircraft available at its battle rating, but it is one of the most rewarding fighters that you can play, not just at 9.7, but in all of War Thunder, period. Or at least that's true until you get smacked out of the sky by an AIM-9L, because remember, this is a plane that has absolutely no countermeasures. Therefore, when somebody asks if they should buy this plane, I'll forever recommend people to just buy the J35XS instead. For 99% of the people watching this video, that's going to be a more fun and more consistent grinder. Besides, at the time of recording, you can't buy the J35A anyway. Like, it's just straight up not available for purchase. So if you wanted to buy this jet, then, well... Anyway, that's enough yapping about what I think of the J35A. Now I want to talk about some other aspects of this jet, stuff that I've so far yet to talk about, but I still would like to show you with the help of some gameplay. Throughout this video, I've already mentioned plenty of times that this jet has bad energy retention, and so far I've portrayed it as exclusively something which is bad. However, in practice, it can also be an extremely useful tool. As you can see here, I'm engaging a MiG-21 SMT, and you'll probably notice that the enemy pilot is doing everything in their power to try to force me to overshoot. But despite their best efforts, they're not going to be able to do anything to get me off their 6 in this situation. They may have been able to accelerate away, but instead they try to dogfight me, and as you can see, it ends very badly for them. So that bad energy retention can also be very useful in trying to stay behind an enemy, even if they're trying to make you fly past them. Interestingly though, you can also use that logic in reverse. As you can see here, I'm being chased by an enemy F5C, and of course the F5C has much better energy retention than my J35A. So I decide to exploit that difference by simply trying to lose as much speed within as short of a time as I can, and I do that with the hopes of forcing the enemy to overshoot. And as you can see here, that plan ends up being successful. Now, of course, I'm pretending a bit like that's surprising, but really it isn't. This plane is incredibly good at forcing enemies to overshoot. Aiming skill issue aside, as you can see, once I finally got my guns on target, I immediately blew up that jet, and that's going to be a common theme throughout these clips, because the guns on this jet are insanely powerful. Which is a good thing because, again, in a lot of situations, you only have a very limited amount of time to inflict a lethal blow onto the enemy aircraft. If you wait too long, you're gonna energy trap yourself and you'll probably end up dying. Or at least that's true unless you manage to also somehow energy trap the enemy aircraft. As you can see in the situation in the background, I'm fighting an F5E, which of course is a jet that sits a full BR higher than the J35A, and perhaps more importantly, the F5E is the best 10.7 fighter in the game, at least in my opinion. But despite that, when you're both going this slow, even the F5E can do absolutely nothing to outturn the J35A, at least not in a horizontal turn like this. As a result, all I have to do is simply slot in behind them, stay there, and then get my guns on target to make them go kablooey. So far, I've exclusively shown you clips in which I get kills using the guns, but of course the J35A also carries 4 IR missiles. Now, these are only AIM-9Bs, which aren't exactly great given the fact that they have only 10 Gs of maximum overload and a cage seeker, but for situations like this where the enemy is basically completely stalled out in front of you, they can still be very useful. However, most of the time that I've found myself really loving these missiles wasn't when I was using them to get kills, but instead when I was using them to survive. For example, in a situation like this, I am going head-on with an Su-25K, which of course carries all-aspect R60Ms, and the R60M is a missile that I'm not going to be able to dodge at such a close range in a head-on. So instead, I prime one of my AIM-9Bs and I fire it at his missile, and as you can see, that's enough to stop it from hitting me. As a result, I get to live another day and continue to fight, even though I don't have any countermeasures. Anyway, with all of that said, if you enjoyed this video, then please do consider watching the one that's currently also shown to you on screen. It's kind of the same thing, a little bit different, but if you enjoyed this video, I think you'll enjoy that one as well. Also, remember to subscribe, join my Discord server, and well, goodbye.